Hi HR Nation, welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives in the world's leading global brands. Today we're joined by Micah Alpern, who's one of Ernst Young's top leaders, who is passionate about purpose, culture and leadership. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Well. Nice to be with us. How you been holding up over the last year?
Pretty good. I've been pretty good. I went through a move. We left Chicago, moved to Florida. I'm one of those COVID movers, so I've improved my quality of life, I'd say, by the weather and just being able to be outside. And work's been really busy. A lot of companies are thinking about their culture, and so that's been great because that's what I focus on. Like you said, is what I'm passionate about.
Before we go any further, tell everyone a little bit more about yourself and your journey to where we are now.
Sure. So I've been doing culture and leadership work pretty much my whole career, over 17 years. I've been in consulting the whole time. It's allowed me to work with every industry, every culture you can imagine, from tech companies to financial services to retail. And so I've seen really every culture that you can think about. And it happened about, I'd say, maybe 12 years ago. I was doing change in people and talent work, and then I got to lead this culture study at the firm I was working at that time. And I learned so much data came in, and that's where it hit me that this is what I want to do. I want to help companies to shape and evolve their culture. And then from then on, I just pushed to do it. And that's my main focus. I still do some, that the other topics, but that's really where I've grown my knowledge and become an expert in the area of culture and purpose and leadership.
What is it about consulting that's kept you on that side of the lane? When are you going to come from the dark side to the light side?
I like how you called it the dark and the light side. For me, it's the opportunity to do something different every time. Every company's culture is different. And there's not one time where I come in and say, well, here's my tried and true solution. We're going to use this exact solution for every single company. It's especially when it's different industries, right? So, you look at some financial services companies, they have more long-standing employees that have been there a long time. So it's a much larger challenge to shift the culture, where some of the tech companies, it's some younger, it's less tenure at the company. They're a little more open to doing things differently. They understand the organization is maturing. So that's part of what I love about this, is that I get to do something different every time. I have my toolkit of how we diagnose it and the different levers that we can pull, but it's really different every time of how we solve for the culture, for the change element, getting people to adopt new behaviors, understanding what motivates those people. That's really the difference in what I love about this work.
Having such a diverse perspective, companies, industries you work within, how are you seeing companies adapt to this new hybrid model? And when it comes to their culture, obviously the work where work is actually being done now, distributed workforce. What are you seeing?
It's been a mix. It's starting to take shape more now as we're going through. This is how we're going to be in the future. We're going to be in more of this hybrid distributed world. More companies are starting to find, what does that look like? What is our culture of the future? What will our ways of working be? What does hybrid even mean? And some of them are getting very detailed, where they're saying, this is what 3 days of working in the office or 2 days of working will look like. Here's all the policies and processes you have to go through. Then you see others, you've seen that in the news, some companies are saying, we just have a 6-word statement, right? Do what you think is right, or work where you think you'll be most successful. So it's a mix. And I think some companies, the more hierarchical, institutionalized companies, are feeling that they need to define it because that's what their employees are used to.
Yes, true.
Clear definition. Whereas others are saying, well, look how well we did without having a clear definition in the last year. It seemed to work. We're performing just as well, if not better, for some. Our employees are happier. That we've taken that commute time out, and so we don't have to define it as clearly. But I would also say that some employees want a little clearer definition of what hybrid work, what our culture looks like, because of the boundaryless world that a lot of us are working in now, right? Where the calls never stop. And so there's
they want
they're handling it.
They want the structure, right? Because otherwise it's kind of just, you end up working all hours. There's no off time. People are emailing you at 1 a.m. It just there needs to be some boundaries, both from a interaction, both through human interaction, but also technology. The technology also needs to be adapted for that. Even simple like things like Slack, right? Saying, maybe don't send this to this person at this time because where they're based is like 3 a.m. in the morning, and it will send it another time as well. So we've got our entire technology stack needs to reflect these changes.
Just because you can reach people at any time of the day doesn't mean that you need to do that. I think also the other thing I would say is that companies are defining, what does the workplace look like? What is an office?
What is it?
Is it a place for us to come in and just for connectivity, for innovation, for collaboration? Is that what the workplace is? And we get rid of all the cubicles and we only have collaboration areas? Well, because why do people need to come in and sit in their cubicle if they can do that at their home and subtract the commute time?
Yeah.
So a lot of companies are starting to try to figure out, what does their office look like in the future? Because we still need to come in. I mean, we're humans, we're social creatures. We need that connectivity. And while we're getting some of it on video or on calls, it's not the same thing. You don't see body language. You constantly seeing yourself, right? When we're on meetings before, I didn't have a mirror in front of me saying, oh, there's me, constantly looking at myself.
Isn't that a crazy thing though, right? That's a whole other thing of just seeing yourself I turn that off, by the way. I would recommend anyone who does video calls that you can turn it off in the settings.
I agree.
In Zoom, you can just remove self-view. Yeah, who wants to stare at themselves all day?
Right. I don't want to see myself all day. Yeah. I'm with you, and especially not everybody's getting ready or dressed up like they would in the office.
Yeah, exactly. So even more so. Yeah.
There's my T-shirt again.
Or there's my mess. There's my mess in the background. There's my messy pile of clothes, or whatever it may be.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think companies need to think about that, and they're defining. We're working with companies to find what is the new definition of the office, what is the new layout, how are we going to bring how are we going to bring people together? Because it can't just be about coming into the office to do work. We need that. That relationship piece back.
Yeah, yes, the workplace isn't just about where work gets done. We've already proven that we can do it anywhere and everywhere that we want to be. So I definitely think it's going to be more of a collaboration space, innovation. There's no longer this one size fits all 9 to 5 industrial age model that's necessary for us to do work. We've proven it over the last year.
Mm-hmm. And included with that is more listening to your employees. With the old concept of, we do an annual survey once a year.
Yeah.
I think most companies are going to go by the wayside of that. Even I think of, EY, where I work, we were checking in on our employees monthly, asking, how are you doing through this? What is it that you're missing? What do you need? Most companies are going to need to do that, especially as they experiment with this hybrid work world to see what's working, what's not. And that way they can, to your point, get a sense of what is the situation for all my different employees. Some employees are going to want to come in because they're in an apartment with 6 other people. That is not conducive to working. They're probably missing coming into the office. Whereas others have their kids at home, and hopefully that will probably go away. So that won't be something that they'll have to deal with as much. But others will say, it's a 2-hour commute for me. I really don't want to do that anymore. And so it's a different situation for everyone. So that the only way you can have that not have a one size fits all mentality is by listening to all your employees, understanding all the different personas and groups, and delivering for each of those.
Yeah. Well, just think about how fast the pace of change is. If you really think that you're going to define this strategy at once a year, that you sit down with that person, create an action plan, that's going to constantly change. It seems crazy to set KPIs, and I'm sure their bonus and their compensation is probably aligned to that as well. And it's just going to change so quickly. It doesn't make any sense to be able to their own learning. How much do you learn within a year that isn't really applied or spoken about during those conversations as well?
Well, and companies have learned just from this pandemic how much easier it actually is for them to change. They used to think, oh, we can't change our culture. We can't change. It's so hard to change. But when they were forced to, and they had to make moves, they were able to take out some bureaucracy. They were able to allow to actually empower employees, which they've always, so many companies have been talking about. We want to empower our employees. Well, they were able to do that, and they did it quickly, and they were just as successful, if not more. So they've learned a lesson here of how they can change faster. And then employees are a little more open to doing things differently than they thought. If you give them the right tools and give them the right guidance.
What are the biggest challenges you're seeing that companies are facing in terms of moving to hybrid distributed workforces?
There's a couple I'd say. One is the amount of what's the right balance of hybrid, right? We've seen some companies come out and say, oh, we want everybody back, or we're going to do 4 days in the office and 1 day at home, or 2, 3, and the pushback they're getting from their employees. I was on one call with a roundtable of CFOs. There's 100 CFOs, and one of them mentioned that they had asked their employees to come back, and the employees just flat out said no. All the employees said, we're not coming back. We like it the way it is. So that's one of the struggles that they're figuring.
The power is now on the employee side, isn't it? For the first time in a long time as well, which is because what are you going to do?
Right. I was just as successful when I was at home. So do you really need me to come into the office? And so the balance there is companies are going to have to figure out we need to define why we need them to come in, what they'll get out of it. What is the purpose of that? Connect back to that purpose. If it's about connecting with all your colleagues, being more innovative. If that's what it's about, if you put that message out there, that's going to be a little more encouraging to employees to understand. Okay, I understand why I need to come in, 1 to 2 days a week, or 1 week a month, whatever the case would be. So I think that's one of the struggles that companies are figuring out. What is the right hybrid mix, and what's the right messaging to encourage employees to adopt to that hybrid way of working.
Yeah. What are companies using to make those decisions? Based on what? Is it obviously you've got the wider purpose, but are there particular data sets they're looking at, and particular, because this is the whole new world right now. There's no real, there's a couple of good case studies, but not many.
Right. It's a lot of trial and error. Companies are actually starting, you've seen so many of them talk for years about, we need to be agile. We need to test and learn. Well, now they're being forced to. They have to test and learn and see what works and what doesn't work. And when you think about the messaging that you were just saying of we're coaching culture, that messaging works a little better, but you really have to get specific, because I've seen a lot of companies say we need people to come back in because we're an in-office culture.
Yeah,
that's not really a description of your culture.
Yeah, people are not responding well to that, by the way. If you're listening right now, don't send that message out, because I can tell you people aren't responding to we're an in-office culture is not good enough.
Right, because employees are saying, well, what does that mean? What is an in-office culture? That's part of what we do is we define what is our actual culture. When we say collaboration or innovation or caring, what does that actually look like? Those are just words on a paper. So you have to define what does it actually look like? And then tell me how that connects to why I'm coming into.
What does it mean for them, right? If you have to understand, what does it mean for me?
You have to be very deliberate about how you design the culture and tying it to what it means for people. So you have to focus on the behaviors, getting granular. The from to. We work like this. This is what we're going to work like in the future. Then you have to really understand the people. What motivates those people? What is it about connecting with their employees? Is it about increased financial returns? Is it about enjoying your job? So you have to understand what would motivate them. And then the third piece is developing everything around that, the whole organizational system. How are we going to do performance management different? How are we going to do rewards? How are we going to make decisions differently? You've got to take those three, really like the culture ecosystem, and bring those together to define the future, and then message around that. We are asking you to come back into the office because we want you to connect with your colleagues so that you can show that you care for each other and support each other. And we're reinforcing that by changing performance management to look at how much you're supporting one another. We're rewarding people for supporting one another. And then you have to change, what are those rewards? I know
so much change
in the past,
yeah.
Right? We can't, a reward can't be, best parking spot or employee of the month. Now it's going to be a stand-up desk. That's what you're going to get as your reward at home. You get a stand-up desk, or we're going to give you better technology, or extra vacation day, or something like that. It has to be. It can't be what it was in the past.
Yeah.
And whatever you design has to reinforce that culture that you say you're going to be going forward.
Another big challenge is obviously on the leaders, right? Because what it means to lead, especially if, for example, you're a manager and half your team's at home, the other half is in the office. That's a big challenge we've never had to face before. I'm even struggling with it, and I only have a small company.
The biggest thing for leaders in this is that they have to make sure that they're giving each employee the same amount of attention and treating them equally, but accounting for their setting, right? So what I mean by that is that if they're employees that are in the office and you're seeing them more often, then you have to make an extra effort to connect with the people that are working from home. And the big shift there is it goes from just focusing on your numbers all the time, right? 25% of your time, you're looking at your numbers, you're driving to your performance, and maybe 10% of the time you're connecting with your employees, to flipping that. 25% now you need to be connecting with your teams, whether they're in the office or out of the office, asking them not just about their performance, asking them about how are you feeling, how are you doing? Do you have the support you need? Am I connecting with you enough? Or do you feel that you're able to provide input to the rest of the team that's in the office versus not in the office?
Yes.
And I think back to, and I'm sure you remember this, before we were in this model, 2 years ago, we'd be in a meeting room and there was two people on the phone, right? And you'd forget to ask, Chris, what do you think on the phone? Right now, you almost need to start with that. Mm-hmm. And say, I understand that you're not here, but you're part of this team. Why don't we start with you and see how you're doing, and constantly be checking in, and make it so that those people who aren't in are pushed to speak up, and don't just sit there and wait to be called on. So those are different behaviors.
We've got to be more deliberate, right? Because where I'd naturally walk past someone in the office and have that kind of water cooler conversation, or the passing in the hallway or lunch, we have to be more deliberate. So,
right.
Yeah.
Imagine, some of the things that you can do to reinforce this is, I remember on some of those speaker phones, they'd have like a guidance on it. Make sure you hang up when you're done. We'll replace those tags and say, ask the people on the phone what they think, right? So it has that little reminder.
Yeah.
It's little things like that really will create the behavior change and create habits.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the type of things that you need to do. And then you also, I would say, I remember one company, the CEO sent out a company-wide reminder or block on the calendar for lunchtime where there were no calls allowed, unless there was an emergency. Well, if you're going to do that, do it for everyone in the hybrid model. Even if you're in the office,
yeah, of course.
If you're at home, that's a rule. This is boundary-free time for everyone. And if it's in the office, maybe it's where you all sit together and eat lunch and connect. And if you're at home, maybe it's that hour break where you're not on a call and you can actually stop and think. Those are the things that the policies, the programs that you're going to need to put in place. Just examples like that. To make it so everyone feels, no matter where I'm at, I'm part of the culture, I'm part of the organization, and you're accounting for my situation versus others.
Yeah. Another cool thing I've been seeing some leaders do is like dropping into Zoom calls.
What's important about that as well is, and something that is leaders need to show during this time, is empathy, right? I'm going to pop in this call and see, how are you doing? What can I help with? It shows that I care as a leader.
Yeah.
And empathy has been something, the more we've done calls, and even this happened even before the pandemic, but the more we've done calls and video chats and things of that nature, that it's hard to show empathy because we're not in person and you can't see the body language. Mm-hmm. That leaders need to work even harder on showing that they care, asking about, what is your situation? What do you think about what's happening? So that example that you gave is a great opportunity. I know our CEO, Carmine, has done that. Where we've seen examples of him popping into meetings, thanking people. Hey, I just want to thank this team for all that you've been doing during this time. That it matters a lot. People react to the leader of their organization coming in out of nowhere and saying, I appreciate the effort that you've been putting in. I know it hasn't been easy. So that's where the empathy element, and then one other piece I'd say leaders need to show a little more of is the vulnerability and saying, here's what I'm going through as well. You know, I'm at home too, so, and I miss seeing you, or I have 3 kids at home and I've been doing calls with you, and I'm also tutoring them at the same time. So I'm with you on this. Then you can create more of that relationship, right? That we're all
kind of gives people permission to speak. Not that you have to give people permission, but you know, they feel like, oh, okay. And it just opens up the conversation, and it's nice to, you know, humanize your CEO or whoever they may be, right? And that's another thing about seeing them on Zoom. You see their house, you see, oh, they've also got screaming kids.
It also allows you to bring in some levity, right, to the situation we're all in. Where we did something once for our team where we did MTV Cribs type meeting where we all went around and showed our work environment, right? And some people their bed was their work environment.
Yeah.
And not every, you know, mine, I have an office, but we're all in different situations, but we were joking about it, and it brought levity and lightened the mood, and just made people feel, again, more connected to their team in a time where we can't be one-on-one.
I'm sure right now they're giving it what to you. You're pretty busy. When companies come to you guys and want to work with you, is there ever an element, the fact that you're going through this whole transformation yourselves as a business, yet you're also working with companies to help them?
We're also testing and learning and seeing what works, and we're taking a big part of what we're doing is we're taking a data-backed approach, right? I told you we're listening more. We're using things such as organizational network, which is a social mapping of your organization, to understand who's connected, who's not connected.
That's a good topic as well. Yeah.
Right
now.
Right. So who are the people that we can help bring people back in the fold so they're not in isolation? So we're doing that to ourselves, and then we're going out to our clients, and every client that we talk to, I start with, let's take a data-backed approach. Let's understand what's happening in your environment. So we have this tool called the Culture Fitness Diagnostic, where we look at your culture health, but we're really looking at what is the experience that people are having, and what is the experience they want, and how can we help them? How can we shift them and help them get that experience? And by doing that, we have the data that we can take to the leaders and show, to the point you made earlier, here's what this group of employees wants, here's what this group, here's how we can motivate them, here's how we can support them. That's really the starting point. If you don't have the data, then that culture is still that soft, touchy, feely thing that some leaders know it's important, that they pay lip service to. We bring data, and then they can't argue it away, because we can say, here's exactly what people are experiencing, and here's exactly what they want. Here's the steps that you can take to get there. Because one of the things we do is we use a prioritization methodology. We're not doing a lot of Likert scale questions. So we're really understanding what is most important to people.
Yeah.
And that's the starting point. The data is the starting point. And then you folks move to the behavioral science piece. How do we help people to change behavior at scale? That's a big part of what we do. We think, we use things such as a sprint methodology around people practicing those behaviors and tying metrics to them. We're using behavioral nudge science, where we're pushing behaviors to people on a regular basis so that we can create those habits. And then again, the piece I mentioned before is we're looking at the operating model components and saying, which pieces do we need to redesign to support you best? And so that's the whole journey that we're taking clients through.
How do you think the next few years are going to play out? I know it's a big question, not asking you to be like a fortune teller,
right.
But
I'm more of a behavioral scientist than an actual scientist. So that's a hard one to answer. I mean, I'm optimistic. I'm always an optimistic person, but I'm optimistic with the vaccines rolling out that we're starting to move in the right direction. And I'd like to think that the future of work is being defined as far as this hybrid model, and that it's going to go that way. There'll be some companies that maybe are hesitant, or some industries, but I think what they're going to find, and I know you and I have talked about this on a previous call, is the war for talent is going to become very challenging for them.
For the ones that don't adapt. Yeah, you're right.
If you're not going to be flexible, adaptable to the environment that people now got a taste of and want to work in, it's going to be very hard for you to win in the war of talent. Because if I can take the same job that I have today at a company that is telling me I got to come back into the office full time and go do it at another company that's just as good, but is saying you can be flexible. You only have to come in 2 days a week. What are you going to do? And it's not about financial reward, because that's one of the lower motivators. It's this more flexible enjoyment in my job that I'm getting, more time with my family. I mean, I have dinner with my daughter every night. So I would miss that, right, if I had to go back five times a week. So that's where I think some companies are going to have to really make that decision, and that maybe some of them will learn it the hard way, that we set a line, we drew a line in the sand that we're going to all come back in, but man, we're starting to see the line of our people leave. And so we need to make that adjustment. So like I said, I'm optimistic that we're going to move to this remote future of work that we've had the technology for a while to use, and now it's really, everybody's using it and it's coming into play. But we still have to find the balance, right, of giving people boundaries if they're not in the office.
Yeah. Honestly, one of the things that sticks with me every day, doesn't ever get old, is my daughter's face seeing when I come pick her up from nursery. Because I never used to be able to do that, because I'd always be working late and I just couldn't have the time.
Agreed.
And just being, when she kind of sees that I'm there and how excited she gets, and then we go to the park for like half an hour, before we go home. It's just, again, that time and I'm doing the same amount of work. I'm delivering the same quality, if not better, than I am now, but the quality of life is completely different as well.
Agree.
So if employers don't offer that to their employees, they will lose some of their top talent.
And that's where I mentioned earlier, I think the people analytics is going to come into play a lot more for
100%.
organizations.
Yeah.
Not just the listening, but I mentioned the organizational network analysis, which is the social mapping of an organization.
Yeah.
Companies really need to understand how their employees are connecting, whether they feel they're connected, whether we are working in silos, who's isolated, so that we can make sure that we're worrying about people's well-being, and that it's not just that, but also that we're getting the diversity of thought that we want. Because if we're excluding some people, we don't know, how are we going to get the best solutions? So that data, again, going back to the data, that allows you to understand who are the right people we need to bring in for a situation. I can remember a few years ago, I was working with a client and they were doing this business IT transformation, and it was going terribly. And we came in and we did the organizational network analysis. And what we saw was the two people leading it were two of the most disconnected people.
Oh, there you go. That's it. That says it all.
Exactly. And all we did was replace the leaders, the people leading it, with two people who
had the buy-in, that had the trust, that had the network. Yeah.
Right. It took off, and it was probably the easiest bit of work I ever had to do, is just say, here, get the right people leading it, and it'll move. And it did. And too often companies, the reason I'm a big fan of network analysis, leaders pick the same people all the time to drive change. That's
also true.
People. The problem is they're just doing it based on who they know gets work done.
Because it's easy.
And an influencer isn't always a get work done person. They're a person that connects with people. I think, if I was to leave people with 3 things that they should think about going forward as they develop this future work, and they think about the culture they want going forward, because everybody's culture is going to evolve. You mentioned earlier, you thought it was funny how people come in and they define their strategy, and they think they don't have to do it more than once. It's the same thing with culture. I always talk to clients about, if you're refreshing your strategy every 3 to 5 years, you should be refreshing your culture, because the culture enables that strategy. So thinking about that as we're all refreshing our strategies right now and defining the future work, there's 3 things that I would leave everyone with. Is one, I mentioned multiple times, but I'll just put it in there again, is being data backed, understanding your people, understanding the different groups of people, and taking a data backed approach to defining your culture and shifting your culture. The second is defining what your culture looks like. You have to be very clear of what you mean by accountability, what you mean by empowerment. People have different interpretations of that. So define it on a behavioral level, get very specific. If you say you're going to be very open across your organization, a behavior isn't saying I'm going to have an open office policy. That's not a behavior. A behavior is saying I'm going to connect with people across my team, 3 people a week across my team, to get their views. That's a real behavior. And then the last thing is to put humans at the center. That's what we always talk about at EY. you can't drive change without thinking about the people element. How are they feeling? What is it going to take to motivate them? Understand those people, not just what their job is, but them personally. What would motivate them? What would help? How can you support them? Those are the three things: the data, the clearly defining the culture, and then understanding those people by knowing what motivates them.
Amazing. Well, Micah, before I let you go, where can people connect with you? If they want to reach out, say hello.
Sure. So you can always connect with me on LinkedIn. You can reach me at EY. My EY email is my first and last name, micah.alpern@ey.com. Feel free to connect with me. As you can see, I love talking about this. I've written over 15 articles, so I'm sure my team and I will keep posting things as we learn in this situation.
Amazing. Well, look, thanks for taking the time to come on the show. A lot of actionable advice, a lot to think about. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, to say the least, as well. So make sure you connect with Micah online. Apart from that, enjoy the rest of your day, and I look forward to speaking again soon.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.
See ya.